Thank you. Thank you. Oh, the magic of television. Thanks so much for being here today. I am Ed McCann, the founder of Writers Read, your host for today's special summer camp show at the Linda, WAMC's performing arts studio here in Albany, New York, the capital. Writers Read celebrates memorable experiences for you, our guests, and our YouTube viewers, and for the writers whose work we feature, whether they are established or emerging, and whether published or not, because at Writers Read it is all about craft and a writer's ability to present an engaging personal story. The stories we feature on our stage, on our YouTube channel, and on our podcast are a maximum of 650 words, and those 2 double-spaced pages translate to a 5-minute spoken word performance. We are delighted to mark our 10th anniversary, 10 shows, 10 years of shows just like this one, with our first trip to our state's capital to celebrate writers and writing, and afterwards some wine with all of you. I'm proud to present the work of the fine writers you're going to meet, and proud that this event is presented with support from the New York State Writers Institute. And I have to pause here to say that from our modest beginnings a decade ago on that June afternoon at the Cell Theater on West 23rd Street, I could not have imagined that the organization that I built with my writer friends would one day be an official Carnegie Hall season festival partner, with City Winery as our venue partner, and now also with sponsor support from the New York State Writers Institute, whose mission dovetails so nicely with our own. I will tell you more about the Institute shortly, but first, we're going to do a little time traveling together. Do you remember the joy of the last day of school? No more pencils, no more books, no more teachers, dirty looks. Yes, you remember. And following the end of the school year, did you head off maybe to a pristine lake somewhere? Maybe as a camper, a counselor, a waiter, for a season of maybe bugs and bug juice, friends and frenemies, cabins, canoes. Maybe you were the only kid in the neighborhood who didn't attend camp, or perhaps you were a parent who suddenly found yourself free for 4 blissful weeks. The stories you're about to hear will likely stir some of your own memories as our talented cast of writers share their own, and I am genuinely excited to open Act 1 of our show with Wanda Fischer. Wanda is a retired public relations professional who, over the past decade, has written and published short stories and 2 novels, Empty Seats and A Few Bumps. If, after hearing Wanda read, you wonder why her voice sounds so familiar, it might be because since 1982, she has hosted and produced a folk music show on WAMC called The Hudson River Sampler. Or there's a chance you might have caught her back in 2012, reveling in her passion for baseball, when she had the opportunity to announce for all 9 innings a game between the Red Sox and the Twins. She's very proud of that one. For Wanda, the hits just keep coming. Just a few years ago, she was inducted into the Folk Radio Hall of Fame, and last year, the Proctors Collaborative inaugurated her into its Eddie's Hall of Fame. Living Camp Brochures, the story Wanda contributes to our special summer camp event, accurately reflects the way she was introduced to and ultimately attended summer camp in the 1960s. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Wanda Fischer.
Before I actually attended summer camp, I wrote to as many as I could find so that I could experience it firsthand. I collected brochures from horse camps in New England when I was a preteen to soak in the professional pictures of those beautifully coiffed young women wearing buff-colored jodhpurs, tall, soft brown leather boots, and velvet-covered riding helmets, heads up, heels down, as they guided their mounts effortlessly over jumps. All looked wealthy, well-groomed, and eager to one day audition for the U.S. Olympic equestrian team. I wanted to be one of them, but I was the chubby bookworm who spent time reading about horses, not riding them. I was horse crazy in the 1960s. I was that girl who drew horses in the margins of her school notebooks while wistfully dreaming that one day my parents would figure out a way to buy me a horse of my own. That concept was foreign to my parents. They had enough problems putting food on the table and clothes on our backs. When the camp brochures began arriving, my mother asked me, just what is Camp Tila-Wookett anyway? I explained that it was a sleepaway camp in Vermont and it had the best name of all the camps, but I knew I could never go there. Damn straight, she replied. What makes you think we could afford anything like this Camp Tila-Wookett, whatever? I never thought you could, Ma, I replied. I just like the pictures of the horses. Yeah, whatever, you and your horses. I did catch her showing a couple of catalogs to my father. He was just as nonplussed as she had been. How would she like to learn about mucking out stalls? That would fix her dreams about horses. I returned to my room and organized the brochures in order of cost, most expensive to least. I found one in Derry, New Hampshire, a famous New England town because astronaut Alan Shepard had grown up there. It didn't cost anywhere nearly as much as Camp Tila-Wookett. I started saving my babysitting money. Maybe they'd let me go to that camp. When I had just enough money for 1 week at the horse camp in Derry, I presented my plan. They mulled it over for a few days and agreed I could attend. When I arrived for the week-long adventure, I was shocked to discover that I was still the only non-wealthy person at the place. I was also the only chubby kid, and I took a lot of heat about that, to the point that I regressed and went to bed a few times. That made the bullying even worse. However, the person in charge of the horses seemed to like me. She decided she would have me ride a gentle, auburn-colored giant who had done steeplechasing at racetracks. I had only ridden a few times my cousin's horse in Virginia, and he bore a Western saddle. This time, it would be an Eastern saddle, like the ones the girls in the brochures used. The first time I rode him, he looked me in the eye as if he were sizing me up. I mounted the saddle, and off we went. At a walk at first, then a trot. He decided he'd jump over a small bench in the yard while I was on his back. That was a surprise. Since I was still on his back, he seemed pleased. He returned on his own to the riding instructor. You passed his test, she declared. Next time you ride him, you will be in charge. She was right. The next time, I held the reins. He did what I wanted him to. This time, it was me whose photo could be in the next brochure, I thought, even though I didn't wear the expensive gear.
Paul Grondahl grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and looking back on his summer camp experiences along the Puget Sound in the 1970s, when rules were an afterthought, he says he sometimes wonders how they all survived. In 1981, he took a train from Tacoma to the University of Albany for grad school in English, planning to stay 2 years. Instead, he met and married Mary, and they now have 2 grown kids and a pit bull mix named Lily. Paul, who says he aspires to be the person their dog thinks he is the Opalka Endowed Director of the New York State Writers Institute at the University of Albany, founded by his mentor, William Kennedy. Paul says it's a dream job that enables him to continue writing books and articles, and the best writing advice he ever received was to, quote, find a good story and get out of the way. He's written 6 of his own books and a handful as a ghostwriter, and in his over 40 years as a reporter and columnist at the Albany Times-Union, Paul has written 10,000 stories. And you're about to hear the first one he's ever written about summer camp. Here to present a magical canoe adventure, please help me give a warm welcome to Paul Grondahl.
In 1976, I was a 17-year-old neophyte camp counselor, along with Dave, another newbie my age. We worked at Camp Blanchette on Raft Island near Gig Harbor. It was a week-long sleepaway camp run by the Catholic Youth Organization, or CYO. We were assigned the oldest kids, 13 and 14-year-olds. We were about to embark on a 4-day canoe trip that the young teens planned as an epic survivalist adventure. "Let's live off the land," hollered the biggest camper, who was also our group's leader. The other kids pumped fists and shouted, "Off the land! Off the land!" They planned to catch fish, dig clams, pick berries, forage greens, and glean the bounty of the Puget Sound. Dave and I stoked their enthusiasm. We loaded up fishing gear, buckets and clam shovels, a guidebook on edible plant foraging, as well as tarps, sleeping bags, cooking gear, first aid kits, and 5-gallon jugs of fresh water. Dozens of campers and counselors watched from the dock as we paddled away. Our kids posed like warriors headed off to battle. The first day was sunny, a perfect start. We caught a few flounder and cod, dug dozens of clams, and picked buckets of blackberries. The kids found fiddlehead ferns. We cooked up a rustic feast and built a big campfire. We told stories and sang songs. The campers had a swagger. It rained for much of the second day. The fish were barely biting. We found no clams. The berries were waterlogged. We did not build a campfire. We went to sleep, soggy and hungry. We woke to more rain pelting our life jackets, and worse, a thick fog enveloped our flotilla of 7 canoes, each holding 2 paddlers, one in the bow, one in the stern, camping gear stowed in the space between them. We were paddling around Fox Island in the southern end of Puget Sound in Washington State. Suddenly, I heard the low, throaty rumble of a cargo ship's massive engine, maybe 1/2 mile away, an angry sea monster churning toward us. We were way in over our heads. I could not see the other canoes through the fog, and I tried not to sound panicked. "Stay calm," I shouted. "I'm going to get us safely to shore. Paddle toward my voice. When I shout hi, you shout ho, hi, ho, hi, ho." We were echolocating like a pod of orcas. Within 5 minutes, all 7 canoes were safely beached and dragged ashore. We heard the huge ship thunder past us, out in the channel, and massive waves soon crashed on the beach. Tragedy averted. The campers huddled under a Douglas firs canopy to stay dry. A couple kids whimpered softly. Tears stained their cheeks. I assured them everything was going to be okay. We stressed safety and tried to keep the canoes in tight formation, hugging the shore. The Puget Sound is a tidal estuary with a tangle of bays, inlets, and islands surrounded by forests and mountains. It is truly spectacular, even mythic as an environment. It was the 3rd day, and the frightful fog incident had pushed the kids over the edge. I gathered them around my canoe, untied the tarps, and opened 2 big coolers. I had packed eggs, bacon, milk, orange juice, pancake mix and syrup, and 3 boxes of Lucky Charms. The kids whooped with joy. It was as if I had brought ice to Macondo. As we gorged on the breakfast feast, I told the campers how proud I was of them. Nobody at Camp Blanchette had ever lived off the land on a canoe trip, their epic adventure. We paddled a shortcut passage back to Raft Island. The rain stopped. The sun broke through. A throng lined up at the dock to welcome back their conquering heroes. The kids had their swagger back. The empty ice chests remained covered with tarps. We never spoke of the Lucky Charms. They were magically delicious.
Susan Lepan Toohey is a happily retired teacher, wife, mother, dog lover, poet, and friend who uses her time to help local agencies in the Capital District work toward the preservation of green space. She has a real love of the outdoors in all seasons and rejoices in sharing the outdoors with others. She writes, paints, reads, plays violin, and appreciates outdoor music and a good laugh with friends. She also enjoys being able to share fun pieces such as the one you're about to hear, entitled Summer Camp 1968. Please say hello to Susan Lepan Toohey.
Summer camp. For me, in 1968, it was an isolated, woodsy, dilapidated Adirondack wonderland I now laughingly refer to as Catholic Girls Torture Camp. By that I mean my emotional and physical endurance was constantly being tested. It was a place where I never fully slept, but also where I experienced true friendship. During my first summer there, I found a bunkmate named Elizabeth, who in today's lingo would be referred to as a science nerd. I tried not to move in my creaky old bunk so as not to interrupt, as she mesmerized me with information about plants, the human body, galaxies, and the infinite nature of space. In that dark, secluded cabin, listening to my new friend seemed far more spiritual than any Sunday Mass. Elizabeth chased away my homesickness and made me forget about the heat and my multiple insect bites. I, in return, regaled her with stories about the dog I was going to get, the candy I would buy at the camp commissary, and showed her the art of making fart noises on one's arm. The way she laughed thrilled me. After a few nights of finding it impossible to settle in our bunks, our counselor called the two of us downstairs, where we found ourselves doing 50 sit-ups, 25 push-ups, and 10 Hail Marys as punishment for talking too much. I can still remember the moldy smell of the cabin's living room carpet as I counted 13, 14, 15. In the morning, the other girls thanked us for serving as the guinea pigs in regard to the punishment thing. Although we could rarely anticipate anything at camp, we certainly learned after a second night of silliness when we were faced with water torture, the camp's expression for having to swim out to the camp's tiny island in freezing cold water at 6 o'clock in the morning. All 8 of us were commanded to make this icy early morning plunge, do the 10-minute swim out, pick some of the island's blueberries, and swim back. The counselor would row beside us and reminded us to watch out for the oars so as not to get hit. She blew the whistle, and we got in. Since Elizabeth was not a strong swimmer, I tried to make sure she got the safest spot behind the boat and continued to whisper, "You can do this." Elizabeth nodded each time. At first, things were going well. No one appeared to be struggling. We were halfway to the island when suddenly our counselor uttered the words, "Oh shit," and I saw my friend's face blanch. Now, I have always loved a well-timed swear word, but not that time. I turned to where the counselor was looking and saw a herd of deer swimming straight for us. My first instinct was to check on Elizabeth, who was now reduced to something I wouldn't call actual swimming, and beginning to sob. I mouthed the words, "Don't die," to which she shouted, "You don't die." I gestured toward the back of the boat and told her to grab on as the others were doing the same. The deer passed us within inches. I heard their huffing breath grow louder as they approached, felt the heat of it on our faces, on my face as they passed, and smelled their musk. We held on to that boat, our knuckles blue, as the herd climbed up on the island and ran for the other side. At that point, I don't know why we thought it was important to grab those berries, but we did. And we all made the return swim safely. When we were able to catch our breath, we talked about our dangerous encounter and cried together, but my tears were about something else. It was our last night at camp. I dreaded going back to a world without Elizabeth. Who would tell me stories as I fell asleep? How would she survive in this world without me looking out for her? There were too many questions, and I missed her terribly already in that summer of '68.
Stephen Madarazs has worked as a communications professional in Albany for more than 40 years. He began his career as a broadcast journalist with WAMC and helped establish its news operation. He also served for more than 30 years as communications director for CSEA, New York's leading union. Currently, Stephen serves on the board of directors of the American Red Cross of Eastern New York and the Capitol Repertory Theater, and he teaches marketing, communication, and public speaking at the University of Albany, balancing advocacy with his love for the performing arts. In his story, Night March at Camp Wauwapex, Stephen recalls a long-ago night in summer camp that had a certain unexpected military flair. Please help me welcome Stephen Madarazs.
Get up. Get dressed. Can't you hear those dogs barking? Get your gear together. We're marching out in 10 minutes. Gear? What's happening? It was midnight on an August night in 1971 at Camp Wauwapex, out east on Long Island, and my 13-year-old self had been startled awake from a deep sleep. The commanding voice was insistent. It was Robbie, a young Army vet recently returned from Vietnam, an adult leader of our Boy Scout troop, although he had no direct relation to any of us. He was only in his mid-20s, but he seemed a lot older. Robbie carried himself with authority, and we were all in awe of him. He was a big, imposing guy with an impressive mustache. While gruff, he was also encouraging and approachable. Over the last year, he had taught us a lot about campcraft and wilderness survival on some pretty intense winter campouts. He could also be coaxed into sharing stories about his Army experiences, and we couldn't get enough of it. Let's go, get it together. We fall in. Robbie was issuing the orders, so it must be something necessary and important. I grabbed a plastic drop sheet, flashlight, and mess kit, threw them into a knapsack. Judging from the sounds and muffled comments coming from nearby tents, everybody else was doing the same. The campsite was aglow from Coleman lanterns as we all gathered in formation, more than a little confused and bleary-eyed. Robbie was in charge, but several dads were there too, with serious faces, and they didn't betray anything. 10 hut! We're moving out! No explanation was given. No one dared ask for one. We marched out into the moonlit night and onto the Lake Road, headed away from the camp facilities. No one spoke. Then into the woods and to a halt a short ways in. Spread out and bed down for the night. Unsure, we all complied without a word, as if to question the order would be to disobey it. I headed into the woods and found a depression filled with dry leaves, wrapped myself in the plastic sheet, and used my backpack as a pillow. I lay there for a while, zoned out, before I fell asleep. Sometime after dawn, we were awakened, reassembled, marched back to our campsite. Over breakfast, the conversation buzzed. None of us was quite sure about what had happened, but we were all in agreement that it had been so cool. Robbie and the other adult leaders were enjoying our reaction and turned the questions back at us, challenging us to explain the what and why of the exercise. They relished the recap, ribbing us about our astonished expressions. On Visitors' Day, the nocturnal saga dominated conversation with the assembled families. The moms, of course, were initially concerned, but the dads assured them that it was simply a rite of passage. So it was. I stayed involved in Boy Scouts for another couple of years until high school activities led to a different path. The raw awareness of early transformative experiences morphed dramatically as I matured. Then, decades of adult life. A few months ago, a childhood friend emailed. He'd been thinking about Robbie as a role model and mentor and wanted my help in locating him. My search yielded a recent obituary. Robbie had been a good and responsible man with family that loved him, a successful career, and good friends. Any of us should be grateful for a life that ends that way. It was good to know and what I would have expected. Still, I wish there'd been an opportunity to let him know all these years later how much his effort to help a group of boys become strong, resilient men was appreciated. The memory of that night march at Camp Wauwapex is in sharper focus now.
Margaret Reynolds graduated from Middlebury College in May and says that even hearing those words scares her right now. At Middlebury, she studied history and political science, and she was the editor-in-chief of the college's student-run newspaper, the Middlebury Campus. While in college, Maggie interned as a reporter for Vermont Digger, 7 Days Vermont, and the Daily Gazette in Schenectady. After she returns from a year teaching English to middle school students in Madrid, she plans to pursue a career as a journalist and imagines that she will probably survive by eating ramen. Maggie was raised in Slingerland. She graduated from Bethlehem High School, and she has an enduring passion for Empire apples. Here to read her summer camp story, Black Tag on Cass Pond, I'm pleased to present Maggie Reynolds.
By the dull light of my headlamp, I pulled on my white hazmat suit. I looped my blue strap through the hook on the harness twice to cover the red strips, remembering the saying, "See red and you're dead." My belayer, Maddie, tied me into the rope with a figure 8 as I tightened my helmet. Taking calming breaths, I approached the ladder with my rounded jousting sword in hand. I stumbled over the rope and narrowly caught my fall. Twinges of fear and doubt spread through me, but there wasn't time to think. It was go time. We had been planning Black Tag at Camp Dakota for weeks, a night for the leaders in training to initiate the younger girls of our leadership division. Everything was timed to the minute. If I hesitated for a second, our meticulous plan would be off. Ascending a 40-foot tree in the dark, clipped into a single carabiner and rope, is as unnatural as slipping off a diving board in high heels. I concentrated on the action of putting my foot on a peg or grabbing one with my hand. The magic of high ropes comes in the challenge of problem solving on an element, to find the most efficient, or sometimes the most tricky, route to get up and across. Climbing in the dark, in a constricting hazmat suit, holding a heavy jousting sword in one hand, with only a dimming light to guide me, might require a little bit more pixie dust than I had. I reminded myself that I had done the catwalk element close to 20 times in the daylight, but this time was with a twist. Each time I felt my hand slipping off a peg, I remembered what counselors always told nervous campers. The ropes course is the safest place at camp. I began to wonder, could that really be true? I brought myself back to the challenge confronting me, stretching to reach another peg. Reaching the top of an element in the daylight is powerful, but even more so at night. As the adrenaline slowly subsided, stillness and fortitude took over. Standing at the height of the trees, listening to the wind rustle the leaves, serenity passed through me like warm tea with honey. The pure southern New Hampshire sky was lit up with thousands of natural light bulbs. I looked down, calmed my vertigo, and hoped to observe the plants and flowers below. To my dismay, in the darkness, all I saw was a seemingly eternal black hole. I heard the younger girls approaching, and I had to embody my character, a crazed but fierce NASA scientist. When the younger campers arrived, one volunteered to climb the element and face me in the jousting battle. She began the climb strong, with swift motions, but as she ascended, I heard her panicked breathing. When she made it to the top, she clung to the tree, struggling to coax herself out to where I menacingly, or so I imagined, stood on the log. She inched her way out, gripping the rope tightly. As much as I craved an intense jousting battle to the death, our stars had not quite aligned for that tonight. After one hit, I willingly fell off the log and screamed, "Ah, you got me," as I was lowered to the ground, dramatically flailing. As I peeled off my hazmat suit, I reflected on my experience. We tend to evaluate our accomplishments in comparison to other people. We wonder if we got the highest grade, if we have enough Instagram followers, or if we are as productive as our friends. But life is not always a competition with others. It can be a challenge within ourselves. I challenged myself by climbing the element in a hazmat suit, holding a sword in the dark. The younger girl and I both pushed our limits and reached new heights that night.
Robert Gumson has been writing memoir and poetry all his life, and at 69 years old, he's had a lifelong series of adventures living as a blind person. In 2017, he retired from a 40-year career in the field of rehabilitation and disability rights. Bob lives here in Albany with his wife, Pat, and has 3 daughters and 5 stepchildren. He's a music enthusiast and guitarist who loves to attend live concerts, and in addition to his writing, he likes to cook, read, exercise, travel, and spend time with his family. Robert's a proud member of the Hudson River Memoir Writers Group, and the summer camp story he shares today is an excerpt from his 2021 memoir, In Blind Sight, from Canarsie, Brooklyn, with love, music, and mischief. The story is called Lighthouse Camp, and I'm pleased to introduce you to Robert Gumson. And we're here. Thank you.
Lighthouse Camp for the Blind in Waretown, New Jersey, pumped my adrenaline from the moment I arrived. The camp was set up for ease of access. Campers were guided from building to building by ropes and along a quarter-mile boardwalk. I quickly broke down the pecking order with kids who had the highest partial vision holding rank over the totally blind kids. In no time, we referred to ourselves as either partials or blinks to describe our levels of visual acuity. At Lighthouse Camp, my visual impairment was not a deficit. I had already been emboldened by full integration with sighted peers and experienced a wide array of places and events that my often open-minded family exposed me to. As the summer rolled along, my attention turned to the opposite sex. Some of the African-American girls seemed fast and would openly talk about sex. The Puerto Rican girls were soft-spoken and demure. 2 friends, Lily and Alice, were always together and alike, except, as our sighted counselors were quick to describe, Alice was round and squat, and Lily was shapely with waist-length black hair. Lily's voice rang out with mischievous banter. She would hear me coming along and tease me by singing sweetly, I want to be Bobby's girl, a song that was on the top 10 on the pop charts. Ay, pendejo, she would exclaim. Alice would respond in rapid-fire Spanish jingo lingo. What are you girls saying? I asked them with a smile in my voice, enchanted by their giggles, but knowing full well that Lily in Spanish slang had just called me an asshole. Lily and Alice seemed to have some days when their self-consciousness got the better of them. They would slink down the boardwalk to the beach during group swim in light summer dresses instead of bathing suits. I sensed Lily's body, which I had only touched in playful ways, like wrestling over a towel or bumping up against her on a school bus. On one of those dog days of summer, Lily and Alice came down to the beach. The partials with the most sight commented on their dresses and threatened to throw them into the water because they looked like they were roasting. Gus from my bunk whispered, maybe we'll all throw in Lily, but Alice would take a football team to lift. Gus's encouragement and Tyrone's eagerness enticed me to join in. The three of us grabbed Lily and hoisted her over the rail of the boardwalk into the water. Her dress flowed up around her shoulders as she screamed with anger and shock on that sweltering day. A few hours later, after evening activities, she kissed me sheepishly on the cheek when we bid the girls goodnight. I stayed up into the early morning hours with my mind racing, making plans for our life together. As I flipped stations on my Sinclair transistor radio, I landed on the Carpenters song that went, on the day that you were born, the angels got together and decided to create a dream come true. I imagined those lyrics were written for Lily. I was delirious with anticipation of spending time with her. My thoughts raced round and round, tiring my mind to join my body, and I eventually fell asleep. With those words of close to you still on my lips when I awoke, I rushed into the new morning. That afternoon, Lily let me hold her hand as we walked down the boardwalk. We occasionally bumped up against each other, and I felt her sun-warmed skin. On another day, as we strolled down the same path, I put my arm around her. Her hair was blowing in the wind. Later on that same day, I took one of the paddle boats out into the lagoon and floated on the gentle waves, dreaming about Lily. She was going to be in my high school in the fall. We would have plenty of time to see each other, and maybe we'd even end up going out together. Thank you.
Joe Bari was born and raised in New York City. He taught biology both in the Bronx and in Troy, New York. He's a versatile Pushcart Prize-nominated writer, and you can find his songs, prose, and poetry in such places as Spotify, Pandora, and the Capital District Poets magazine. In his story, The Unenlightened Voyeur, Joe relates some of the perils faced by pubescent boys at his gender-segregated summer camp. Please welcome to the Writers' Read stage, Joe Bari.
The cone-shaped speaker mounted above the door of the hi-fi shop on Castle Hill blasted "School's Out" by Alice Cooper. It was June and the 1972 school year had ended. I was 13 and leaving the Bronx tomorrow for a camp on a quaint lake in the Adirondacks. Many chores before I left, including painting the garage doors, packing my clothes, but most vital was to score an ounce of weed. That should last me the month I'd be up at the hellhole, as I called it. Actually, it wasn't that bad, except for the fact that the girls were in a separate camp on the opposite side of the lake. Very parochial. The worst thing was to be caught spying on the Girl Scout. On the bus ride north, I befriended Tim from Brooklyn. Being from diametrically opposed boroughs, we were supposed to be arch enemies. But we had a lot in common. The Mets, the Stones, and our love of herb. A boring week of swimming, softball, and crafts began to evoke an appetite for the risque. In a quest to feed this need for excitement, late one night, we stole an old rowboat. Sharing a joint along with the oars, we made it across the girls' side of the camp. Our hormones percolated at the thought of seeing some flesh through an open window. We stationed ourselves in the woods with the perfect view of a vulnerable open shade. We smoked another doobie and snickered. After 20 minutes, our only prize was one fully clothed girl walking past the well-lit fenestra. Hearing the crunch of branches behind us, Tim turned and bolted. I was a little slow to catch on. Blame the weed. By the time I turned around, there were at least 20 young ladies staring at me. "A peeping Tom," one yelled. "Let's teach him a lesson," another scowled. "We'd like to see you," a third chimed. "Get out into the open." I walked out into the clearing, curious but unafraid. "Take your shirt off," a girl yelled. I was still not intimidated. "He looks like a little baby boy," a girl mocked. "Make him take his pants off," they all giggled. I think I'm going to leave now. I was beginning to feel a little uncomfortable as my machismo quickly melted away. "You ain't going anywhere until we see your cute little bottom," they all laughed uproariously. With the need to placate and get out of there as quickly as possible, I turned and dropped my shorts. The cascade of wolf calls and whistles can still be heard in my dreams today. I was praying for the matron to come along and save me, but no such luck. I hoped she wasn't in on all this. Well, I think I'll go," I mumbled, turning toward them, covering my nether region. "One more thing. Put this on," they chanted in unison. "Put it on, put it on, put it on." Landing at my feet was a floral, one-piece, old lady's bathing suit. I slipped my feet in the holes and pulled the straps over my shoulders. The laughter was rollicking. My privates dressed left with a peekaboo. I felt my face go beet red. I ran back toward the rowboat, but Tim had absconded with it, and I was forced to swim back to the boys' side of the camp. I finally returned and changed as quickly as possible before anyone could see me. I left the old bathing suit in the middle of the bunkhouse floor. The next morning, the cabin leader held up the wet suit with a tree branch. "Where did this come from?" You could hear a pin drop. Just as the camp mentor picked up that wet bathing suit, I scraped my ego off the floor with a newfound respect for womankind. Thank you.
Louis Wittig lives here in Albany, and his fiction and essays have appeared in Runlandia and on Substack. Thanks to his love of writing fiction, for hours at a time and mostly in his basement, Louis excels at creating characters that are definitely not him. That is, they may be private detectives or space actuaries or whatever else he dreams up. What Louis definitely is, however, is a writer who's also a creative director in advertising who lives with his wife, Grace, and daughter, Evie. And here to share his summer camp story entitled Gulag, please help me welcome Louis Wittig.
So maybe I wasn't exactly sure what a gulag was the summer after I turned 9, but I knew who I was and exactly how the world worked. I knew what summer was, being bored with friends, being bored at the pool, being bored as my Uncle Dennis wandered into the house without knocking, made himself a sandwich, told me the latest idea he'd had for a book he'd write, then wandered out again. Being bored at the public library, looking at the covers of thick books with bright red titles that read Gulag Archipelago. I didn't know many bad words. Gulag sounded pretty bad. Archipelago sounded like a dinosaur. I was also pretty hazy on sleepaway camp. Mom decided that I should go. It was a camp for special kids with asthma, which I think she thought was like having polio. For me, it was mostly about trying to remember where I left the inhaler I never used. After our Honda Civic pulled away without me in it, counselors walked me and a bunch of other strangers my age to see a box. They called it a cabin, but I was pretty into Legos at that point, so I knew about construction. No interior walls, no insulation, one light bulb. This is what you made when someone else had already used all the Legos you needed. And I had to sleep in it. At camp, you couldn't do normal stuff, like wander away from everyone else, find an empty room, and curl up with a Sherlock Holmes collection, which I did routinely at my own birthday parties. It wasn't a do-your-own-thing kind of place. That was all I'd ever done. There was a big plywood board full of little hooks down at the lakefront where we swam. When you went into the water, you hung a name tag on the right side. When you ran out, shivering and muddy, you moved it back to the left. Except I forgot to. It wasn't until hours later, when I heard my name booming over loudspeakers and echoing off trees, that I realized they thought I was dead. I was pretty embarrassed to admit that I hadn't drowned. Fires were cool, no question. We did those by the lake at night. But no matter how long you looked into a fire, you still wouldn't see an episode of The Golden Girls. You could only see Golden Girls at 9 o'clock on Saturday on NBC. And right at that moment, it was Saturday. And Rose Nyland was telling a story about St. Olaf, and I wasn't watching. And if Dorothy zings Blanche, and I'm not around to hear it, do I even exist? Past the fire, across the vast, starless water to the far side of Lake George, I saw the tiny twinkling lights of normal human life. I'd always called places like that here, but now they were a very distant there. I had no idea where I was. It was very dark. I don't remember exactly how, after just 3 nights, I ended up in the camp director's office with someone dialing my home number. I think he's pretty homesick, the counselor said to my mom before handing the receiver to me. I knew she'd need some convincing, but I couldn't find the words. It's like a Gulag archipelago here, Mom, I sobbed. I'm in a Gulag archipelago. Years later, I learned that Stalin's victims were also not allowed to watch Golden Girls. So I wasn't entirely wrong. Mom laughed. She was going to make me stay. But Uncle Dennis happened to be there when the phone rang. Dennis always had a lot of big ideas that people didn't understand when he tried to explain them. Dennis got me. And he drove me back home to the center of the universe, just outside of Albany, New York.
Writers Read gives voice to the stories that bind us. We are a federally recognized 501c3 nonprofit literary organization with a mission to create performance opportunities for writers. We also create memorable experiences for our guests with events like this one, gathering to share stories and wine and conversations that engage us all. And this, by the way, is our 10th year. We have been doing this for 10 years. We started in 2014, Father's Day weekend. And it's quite remarkable that we're still here through a pandemic, through lots of other things, and continuing to attract new writers, new listeners, new audiences. And I'm just really delighted to be here in Albany and share this with you. We are working to attract more writers and more listeners, and to make the work of talented writers like these available to a wider audience. Your ticket purchase helped offset our cost to produce this event, but your donations are an investment in our mission that will help us reach the next level. Please consider a tax-deductible gift today to help us get there. Scanning the code on the back of your program will take you to a donation page on our website. But another way that you could help would be to take your program with you today. Don't leave it behind. Take it with you, give it to another writer, give it to someone else whom you think would be interested in what we're doing. A lot of the growth, a lot of the friends that we have made over the last 10 years, it's been a very organic process that people just naturally are drawing closer to the organization and sharing what their experiences have been. And so that is also another way that you really can help a great deal. We are going to take a 15-minute break right now for you to stretch your legs and get a drink. And when you hear this bell, that will be your cue to get back to your seats for the second half of our show and more great stories. I'm Ed McCann, and this is Writers Read. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of our special summer camp event here at the Linda in Albany, New York. Before we bring up the next writer, I want to thank the folks who helped make this event possible. Thank you to Peter Hughes, the General Manager and Program Director here at the Linda, as well as the Linda's Technical Director, Nathan Scheid. Our thanks to WAMC's Joe Donahue, host of the Roundtable and the Book Show, a well-known lover of books and writers and writing, for sharing his airtime to help drive submissions, leading to the rich group of stories that you're hearing today. Finally, my sincere gratitude to Nancy Carey Cassidy, who set the wheels in motion to bring us all here together today. And let's please give Nancy a hand of her own. But wait, there's more. I'm also grateful to the Writers Read editors and board members who helped steer the organization. And today, I'm especially thankful to our sponsor, the New York State Writers Institute at the University of Albany. Their mission is to explore and teach the craft of writing, to celebrate diverse voices in all genres, and to foster a vibrant community of readers and writers who engage in meaningful dialogue. Their Visiting Writer Series tops the list of many programs and festivals and workshops conducted throughout the year with the goal to, quote, enhance and celebrate literature, writing, and performance, and to recognize the position of writers as a community within the larger community. And when I read that line for the first time, I have to say it really resonated for me. And there was a real, flash of recognition because as I have often said, when I'm in a room full of readers and writers and people like yourselves who appreciate and are interested in what we're doing, I feel like I am among the members of my tribe. And so they stated it as, we are a community within the larger community, and that acknowledgement just really resonates because we've been building community. And people like yourselves who've drawn closer to our organization by attending our events or submitting their work, we share an interest, a passion, a unique talent, and I appreciate opportunities like this to connect with all of you and connect with more of you. So thankful to the New York State Writers Institute for their acknowledgement and their support of our community. You can learn more about the Institute and its programs and events at their website, nyswritersinstitute.org, and let's give them a hand of their own. Thank you. Carol Fitzgibbons opens Act 2 of our show. Academically and professionally, Carol was immersed in the business world, and it wasn't until retirement that she contemplated writing. But she felt unqualified because she didn't have a creative writing degree. And so Carol took to the task at hand. She spent months studying her craft. She attended many conferences and writing workshops, and most fruitful of all, joined what she describes as a fabulous local critique group. Today, after many revisions, her first book is complete, a door has opened, and she's eager to begin writing the next one. And she traveled today from her home in Saratoga Springs to share her story, Summers on Tully Lake. Please welcome Carol Fitzgibbons.
Arriving home the last day of school each June, report card in hand, I'd find my mother packing our station wagon with everything a family of 5 might need for the summer. I longed to pull her aside and whisper in her ear, Remember, pack only the happy stuff, Mom. Leave the sad stuff behind. By midnight, my parents, 2 older sisters, my dog Pepper, and I were on our way to our camp on Tully Lake outside Syracuse, our home the rest of the year. Our camp was a rustic little place, painstakingly and lovingly built by Dad. From found lumber and rusty nails, he hammered back to straight, good as new. There was no plumbing short of a big red pump that needed priming, bolted to our kitchen sideboard, the drain pipe spilling water to a rock bed below. I began each morning donning my bathing suit. As I snatched a bar of soap and a bottle of shampoo, Pepper wiggled in anticipation. We'd race together as best friends do, eager to be the first to reach the water, the first to splash our joy spilling over us. With no phone or television, my sisters and I learned to make our own fun. We'd go for hikes, always with a snake stick in hand. We'd swing endlessly on the rope swing Dad made for us, and we'd swim. We'd take rowboat rides and go night fishing with Dad. Each afternoon, I'd reach under our dock where 2 big black bullfrogs bobbed, as if waiting for me to scoop them up, to rub their noses and bellies, trusting me to release them back to safety. With tray tables as our desks, we'd play school, my oldest sister always snagging the coveted role of the mean teacher wielding the pointer. Monopoly, Parcheesi, and card games were always in play, as well as never-ending jigsaw puzzles set up on our screen porch begging for attention. This was a reader's paradise. My favorites involved horses, My Friend Flicka and Black Beauty, the pages worn thin. Perched in my upper bunk of our tiny bedroom, windows opened, Pepper held tight, I'd fall asleep to a symphony of crickets chirping and the deep-throated drone of an army of bullfrogs. Above all, my favorite thing to do was sitting at the edge of our dock, my feet cooling in the water, Pepper close by my side. I became one with the lake, and although there was no escaping the undercurrent in our family, the stillness captured me, the smell of pine, the musty shore, hills of trees as far as I could see. Being alone, I drank it all in, the stillness never leaving me. Damn the 2-sided coin, for without it, this would have painted an idyllic picture. My parents were able to escape their shattered dreams during our summers on Tully Lake. Maybe Mom felt the same stillness I felt because her drinking ceased here. Or perhaps with Dad at work, Mom held it together, knowing the survival of her 3 little girls near water was in her hands. Like the bullfrogs under our dock, did Dad take a leap of faith, trusting that Mom could do this? They were at their happiest here. We all were. If we lived all the seasons on Tully Lake, would my parents have found their happy ending? The hint of what could have been felt within reach here, but it was never meant to be. Yet life at this precious oasis amidst the storm, where the good memories far outweighed the bad, is what I choose to remember. Its essence grabbed hold of me and became so much a part of who I am, intertwining with my soul, forever finding a home there.
Until today, Anthony Cresswell looked at his writing as a bit of a hodgepodge, the result of a 40-year academic career. Previous highlights include articles on analytical chemistry, educational politics, technology, and not at all least, his thoughts on educational topics in both Thailand and Indonesia. Today, we're lucky that Anthony decided to branch out a bit, or rather look inward at long last, and he welcomed the opportunity to write something personal. And he didn't hesitate to submit a summer camp memory, a story he says he has never even shared with his children. Here to read his story, Sentry at the Swamp, please welcome Anthony Cresswell.
Somewhere in the southern Wisconsin woods, there's a swamp bordering a small lake. That's where I spent most of the last night of my only summer camp experience, alone, sitting on a rock. That was my sentry post, to watch for an enemy approaching our position by the narrow footpath through the swamp. My duty was to warn my cabin mates up the hill behind me of any imminent attack from boys from the other cabins.
The clear night and the full moon let me see across the swamp to the woods on the other side, and if I stayed alert, I'd have time to sound the alarm and retreat without becoming a casualty. A casualty, in this sense, meant returning in disgrace to camp in the morning in my underwear. That's what was at stake in this end-of-season pants war. Imagine a ruthless overnight battle of cabin against cabin, each housing 8 to 10 preteen boys, to separate any other cabin's occupant from his pants. The cabin with the most captured trousers, shorts, jeans, whatever, would be the winner. The teams were free until sunrise to hide, roam, and attack anywhere on the camp's woods, lake, and fields. I know it's hard to imagine that kind of Lord of the Flies anarchy today, but there it was. My team needed a sentry at the swamp because we chose a defensive strategy. We set out after sunset toward the swamp, not to find the boys from the other camps, but to find a spot easy to defend. It was a warm southern Wisconsin night, so it was easy to follow the trail, guided by the full moon. Our trail led through some woods and down a slope to a narrow footpath through the center of the swamp. We followed the footpath across and up the hill on the other side. At the top, we found level ground, a good place to hide and defend. It looked safe. Only a single avenue of attack, or so we thought. A good defense required a sentry up the swamp edge to warn of any sneak attack. For reasons lost in time, I volunteered. Maybe it was to repair my image, tarnished by several poor performances in our daily swimming contests. Maybe I saw visions of an heroic defense of our team, of being carried back to swamp on their shoulders. Hard to say. Fate would have it another way. We thought our hilltop was well hidden, only one avenue of attack. Wrong. Another path from the cabins led to the back side of the hill. After I'd sat for hours calmly watching the cattails, another cabin came up the back way and struck. I heard the yelling right away, but hesitated. Was this just a diversionary attack? Should I abandon my post without orders? Well, nothing was coming my way, so I ran up to join the battle. But by the time I got up the hill, the attackers were repulsed. They made off with only one prize, wrestled off one cabin mate. He was a small, chubby guy, as I recall, who lay thrashing around on the ground, whining about his loss. Worse yet, he was thrashing in a patch of poison ivy, sans trousers. We heard about that the next day after the rash bloomed. The rest of the night passed quietly, but with a guard at the other path up the hill. Though not heroic, my lonely vigil resulted in two valuable life lessons. First, that it could be peaceful, even pleasant, being alone in the dark, in spite of being unprotected from snakes or other swamp creatures, or even the odd vampires or werewolves that might emerge under a full moon. My first ripples of fear slowly faded, and I could enjoy the cool night and the moonlight. The second lesson was to beware careless assumptions about safety and risk. Always check the back way in.
After a 40-year stint in the East Village, Emily Rubin now lives in Columbia County. An arts activist at heart and a writer in her dreams, she's published a novel as well as short stories, essays, and poems, work that appeared in places like Poets and Writers Magazine and the Red Rock Review. She founded and produced Dirty Laundry, Loads of Prose, which is a reading performance series in laundromats across the country, and now runs the Right Treatment Workshops, that's Right with a W, in NYC and upstate cancer centers. A recipient of the Amazon Debut Novel Award Contest, a finalist in the International Literary Awards, and a Pushcart Prize nominee, she's been a guest lecturer and taught fiction workshops at Bard College and Columbia University's Narrative Medicine program. In her youth, in the 1960s, Emily attended sleepaway camp in the Catskills and was a dance instructor for one torturous summer at a New Hampshire arts camp, experience that helped inform her summer camp story, Latrine Days. Please help me welcome to the stage Emily Rubin.
Ellie Rue Solomon was shuffled off to Camp Rocky Glen to give her a break from the luxurious behavior of her brother Ricky, a depressive 15-year-old. Their parents told her it would be good to experience the solidarity of female camaraderie with other Girl Scouts. Embarking on the 2-week stay, she hoped the rugged Catskill environs would free her from the purgatorial perfection of the suburbs. During the first week, with the idea of proving her leadership abilities, she instigated a water balloon fight in her cabin, resulting in the head counselor's bunk getting soaked. This was seriously frowned upon by the fastidious counselor, who wore her hair in a beehive, never swam, had the patience of a mosquito, and a penchant for tweezing campers' eyebrows. Ellie Rue rejected the painful cosmetic procedure as it reminded her of the torturous pokes and stings her brother inflicted on her. The morning after the water balloon fight and soaking, a jury of counselors and campers tried Ellie Rue without benefit of counsel, and the punishment was rendered. Clean the latrine inside and out with these, intoned the affected counselor, handing her a toothbrush, sponge, and a bucket of soapy water. Ellie Rue scrubbed and scrubbed until her knuckles and knees were scraped and bloody. From then on, she was shunned by the other campers and spent the second week on her own, which she didn't mind. No sense of humor, she grumbled about the counselors and the prissy campers. From the distance of her deserted island of self, she watched the other campers compete over the conventional passions for lipstick, nail polish, blow-dried hair, and 17 magazine. She kept her desire for these frivolities a secret, hiding out in the now spotless latrine to pore over pages of fresh-faced models and articles about acne and French kissing. Afterward, she would slip the magazine into the middle of the dog-eared pile in the community room while no one was looking and go off to commune with nature, diving off rocks into the dark lake and stealthily hiking through the woods. Coming upon stands of milkweed in fields, she observed caterpillars forming cocoons, and like her, they were also alone, solo. In her first ever journal entry, she wrote, "Inside each chrysalis, a blob transforms, leaving behind a squirming, cylindrical body. I am a blob, a milkshake. I am furiously furry. Is a butterfly really free? When they become airborne, the dangers only increase. Hungry crows, speeding cars. The human-tainted world coats our shit in chintz and perfume." The camp scheduled a talent night. Ellie Rue signed up and performed a wrenching solo depicting a caterpillar's transformation in the emotionally wrought style of her idols, Isadora Duncan and Martha Graham. She wore a flesh-colored full-body leotard and wrapped herself in a discarded sail from the camp's armada of sunfish. Her mother had packed 2 training bras in her steamer trunk without telling her. She had never worn them, but when sewed to the leotard, they worked nicely as butterfly wings. For a soundtrack, she recorded her bunkmates' teeth-grinding, epic snoring, and tearful gasps. Homesickness was rampant among the cattiest of girls. The night of the performance, the torturous sounds filled the theater as she writhed on stage, rolling over and over, and finally ripping through the muslin with her green-handled, Girl Scout-issued pocket knife. She bowed to an utterly silent, dumbfounded audience. Some tittering followed as she walked off stage, still partially cocooned. When she returned home from camp, Ellie donned a baseball cap and dungarees with rolled-up cuffs and embraced a life of touch football, baseball cards, and chemistry set explosions. She finished the summer relatively safe. Her brother, having discovered how to blunt his rage with masturbation and marijuana. With the new school year looming, she looked back on the penance of cleaning the latrine and the boldness of the cocoon dance as a blueprint for her permanent emergence and escape from suburbia. Thank you.
Peter Finn grew up in McCownville, went to Catholic schools in Albany, and he lives in Averill Park. He's now retired after 30 years with New York State Parks and then 10 more teaching at the Rockefeller College of Public Affairs at the University of Albany. His writing itch resurfaced just before the pandemic, and these days he's a regular contributor to the Sand Lake Library's Just Right group, where he writes memoir as well as short fiction, focusing on growing up, on nature, and on today's America. He loves sharing his work. We're delighted he's going to do so today, and here to present his summer camp story, Unnamed Summit. Please say hello to Peter Finn.
I look for it whenever I drive north from Bennington, a notch in the muscle of a mountain to the east. The guidebook called it Unnamed Summit. It should be Just Kill Me Now Mountain. Summer, 1972. I was an 18-year-old counselor at Stratton Mountain Scout Reservation. As the camp's nature guy, instead of hiking and backpacking, I spent leisurely days tromping through the woods, catching bugs, scoping animal tracks, and identifying trees and flowers. It was week 3, and 2 14-year-old scouts were taking the difficult hiking merit badge. Their final requirement is a 20-mile hike, and they've chosen a route going from camp south on the Appalachian Trail, the AT, over Glastonbury Mountain to Bennington. As this was off property, someone over 18 needed to lead them. Me. We hit the trail a little after 6. Our destination, the Notch, a burger and fish fry diner on Route 9 that serves enormous ice cream sundaes. Pickup time, 7 o'clock. Gets dark, about 8. 22 miles in 13 hours. No sweat. I carry the trail guide in my pocket, but it's useless. It assumes hikers on the AT are going north, not south. Everything the book says is a descent is really an ascent. Up is down, I say to the scouts. Is that Orwell or Alice in Wonderland? I get back blank stares. It's wet after overnight showers. Thrushes trill as we climb through a grove of beeches. We squish around mud wallows, stepping from rock to rock. There's a south breeze, the sky clears, and the morning warms. We're up and over the first ridge, flat, through a glade of birches, then down, like stairs, losing all the altitude we'd just gained, to a weepy stream. We hop over, kick clumpy mud from our boots, and start back up again. It's a 600-foot climb straight up. A 50-story building, stair-stepping all the way. It's Unnamed Summit. The scouts gambol ahead like a pair of Labradors. What isn't rock is mud. We go up and up more. Now they're singing a goddamn Beach Boys medley. Boots weigh a ton. Where's the top? To a ridge and through a spruce thicket. And down, and down, and down, steeply down, losing all that elevation again. 50 floors. Okay. My left knee wobbles. I put my hand on it to make it stop. Stoop like an old man. My right leg spasms. Both legs turn to jello. And I'm on my knees in the mud. Deer flies circle my sweaty head like buzzards. The fabled Vermont catamount is likely lurking nearby, stalking, about to cull the weakest from the herd. Me. We're still only halfway to Bennington. Going forward is the same as going back. Shame or fame? And I'm up. A sip of water to hide why I've stopped. A couple of baby steps, a shuffle, like walking on ice. We slog past the beaver pond and up again. What the trail guide calls a moderate descent, except we're going the wrong way. Up. Unnamed summit is behind us, and we're climbing Glastonbury. Finally. Up and over and down to dinner and ice cream. Left foot, ice cream. Right foot, ice cream. Left foot, on and on. Ahead, the scouts are jabbering about some girl from school who they think's like somebody else, somebody who likes somebody else, or something. At Glastonbury Summit, they're eager to climb the fire tower. Please, just 50 more feet. I sit on a rock. We're moving again, down, steadily, gradually, thankfully, down. It's past 7. Daylight ebbs, the sky pinks. We hear a creak. It grows louder. We see a house through the trees, hear a truck downshifting out on the highway, and pick up the pace. Have to get to the notch before all the ice cream's gone.
Barbara Chepaitis is the author of a dozen novels and 2 books of nonfiction. She's also the founder of the storytelling trio, The Snickering Witches. It's doubtful her mother will ever forgive her for all this, though she's always claimed she was the only real witch in the family. Barbara says she was raised off-leash with no formal camps, just kids running around and digging deep. She lives in a rural area in Albany County with her husband, some dogs, cats, and chickens, along with the occasional bobcat guest, a place where she still spends a great deal of time digging in the dirt. Here to read her summer camp story, Camp Can You Dig It? Please give a warm welcome to Barbara Chepaitis.
When we were young, our summer camp was the backyard. We were kicked out of the house shortly after breakfast, and we'd gather up neighborhood friends, and then we roamed, off-leash, totally off-leash. At around noon, we'd wander into someone's house for a snack, so we didn't starve. A nutritious snack, ice cream pressed between cookies, fried squash blossoms sprinkled with confectioner's sugar, or butterflies, which were saltines coated with peanut butter and fluffernutter, and Kool-Aid for a drink. Then we were sent back outside and told to stay out till they called us home or the streetlights came on. I grew up in Columbia County when it was still agricultural and somewhat industrial place. Our only organized activities were swimming lessons at the local pond and the annual pet contest at the playground, where a pet cricket was as likely to win as a dog. That playground had monkey bars with a cement pad underneath. Yet dirt is soft, cement is not. We quickly learned not to fall on our heads. So we were on our own, inventing our own forms of amusement. They varied but often involved dirt and digging. For instance, my sister Norma and our best friend Nancy and I would dig in the yard and try to reach China, where we assumed we'd walk upside down with cone-shaped hats. But then, one day, Nancy stopped us and said, if we dig too deep, we might reach hell. What then? We were Catholic girls. We stopped digging. We made soup instead by mixing dirt and weeds and water and spinning the mixture around the wheels of our bicycles until we had, soup. Much safer. Our summers also involved excursions on our bikes to a local quarry to dig in rocky soil for fossils. This was totally illegal, but we found a lot of fossils and imagined all the secret lives that they held, spinning endless stories about them. We also rescued baby birds that fell out of their nests, which we tried to revive with Wonder Bread and milk. Right? No, baby birds don't thrive on Wonder Bread and milk. They invariably died, and we'd have elaborate funerals with well-decorated coffins made of shoe boxes, and we'd bury them. More digging. Periodically, we'd try to dig up Myrtle, our pet turtle, who was buried the previous year, to see if she was bones, or a fossil maybe. We never found her. But perhaps because of Myrtle, our attention was captured by the headless lapping turtle in our garage. Little explanation here. My father was a hunter and a fisherman, and he fed his family on what he caught. That particular year, he caught a snapper, which he hung headless in the garage until it was ready for my mother to make, soup. We weren't allowed in the garage unsupervised, but, headless snapper, irresistible. So we crept into the garage very quietly. We approached the snapper carefully. Then Nancy poked me and said, "Touch it." My sister joined in. "Touch it, touch it, touch it, touch it, touch it." I was the youngest. I had to prove myself. I moved closer and closer. I tapped the shell with the tip of my finger, and immediately that snapper reached out its claw and swiped at me. Headless, dead for days, it took a swipe at me. We ran screaming from the garage and collapsed in the yard, breathless with fear and exhilaration. We had met the beast, and yet we lived. At some primal level, what I learned at Camp Can You Dig It was the following. 1, dirt holds secrets, and they're fascinating. 2, don't fall off the monkey bars on your head. 3, life goes far beyond our small thoughts. So stay curious. Keep digging.
Casey Vincelette grew up in Bethlehem and Troy and attended SUNY Geneseo with the Edgar Fellows Honors Program, during which time she served as fiction editor for the literary magazine Gandhi Dancer. In 2018, after earning her BA in creative writing and communication, she then moved to Chicago to teach middle school English and science. Casey came back home last summer to help care for her grandparents, and she currently works with the AmeriCorps program. We learn about some very special children Casey cared for in her summer camp story, Mulberry. Please welcome to our stage, Casey Vincelette.
"I've never been to the hospital before," says John. "Have you?" The conversation taking place over the Lego bucket, which I've been tuning out, now holds my rapt attention. I watch Devon's face. It's a normal little boy's face, except for the long mulberry birthmark across it. The birthmark is not raised, but it's dark, unmissable. It does not look like a cut or a scrape. It is clearly a birthmark. Anyone who knows what a birthmark is can see that's what Devon has on his face. But how do you learn what a birthmark is, particularly an unusual mulberry birthmark? In my head, I've called it a mulberry birthmark since I first saw Devon arrive at day camp. I'd read Lord of the Flies that year in AP English class. Mulberry-colored was the descriptor assigned to the birthmark of the first boy to die. I liked the book, but I hated the class. All my classmates had known each other for years, it seemed to me. At the end of the school day, I crossed the street from the high school to the elementary school, and I watched the kids till their parents could pick them up after work. When school lets out for the summer, I work 6-hour shifts each weekday for the same program, now rebranded to a day camp. It was the ecosystem that had sustained me while my parents worked, only now it sustains me monetarily, and to some extent, during these summer months, socially. John has just as much irregularity to contend with as Devin does. Every other week, John is traded off from mother to father. Mom feels he should be on mood-regulating medication. Dad disagrees. Every time we try to make John get off the computer, he has a full meltdown, in the truest sense of the word. His body melts to the floor, his face melts into tears. Onlookers may pause for a moment to shake their heads, but then move on with their day and pay him little mind. No one asks him what's wrong with him. John has an obnoxious voice and a sly smile. He's a hypocritical tattletale. There are dark purple rings around his eyes. When he's not on the computer, there's barely a moment that isn't filled with his chatter. I like him. At this moment, John is curious about Devin. All the children are. Some will ask, "What's wrong with your face?" Then Devin pauses, and he internalizes what he's heard. After a beat, he lashes out, or he runs away to be alone. Devin's not very verbal. He says little except to express basic needs. I teach him hand games, and he delights in them, insisting that we go again and again, clapping each other's hands in pattern and rhythm. He hogs my hands, giving no other impatient child a turn. If I sit cross-legged on the ground, he immediately wants to curl into my lap. Devin doesn't like to play with other children, just whatever toys they're using. I wonder how many times in his life he'll be asked what's wrong with his face. I can see Devin is now internalizing what John's just asked him. John is surprisingly subtle in his approach. Once he's asked the question, he darts up a look at Devin's marked face through his ringed eyes, but otherwise casually continues rummaging for the right Lego. Maybe he's noticed others asking directly and has ascertained that this is not the way to acquire the information he's after. To my astonishment and very great relief, once Devin has finished internalizing, he simply replies, "No," albeit with slitted eyes, and continues to snap Legos together. The three of us by the Lego bucket, kids around us, the day camp itself, all exist for a moment of real summer that may even stay with us after. I'll never know for sure what was internalized. For me, the birthmark will always be on Devin's face, though a hemangioma may fully disappear by late childhood, leaving behind only what's invisible.
Mara Lefebvre is a writer, visual artist, and retreat junkie with an appreciation of beauty, excellence, and good design in all things. She's fascinated with how memory works and writes micro-memoirs reconstructing her past, chock full of lies, laments, and lunatics. She received an honorable mention in the New Millennium Creative Nonfiction Contest, and her work has been featured in several online literary magazines. A lifelong interest in yoga and frequent walking meditations support her creative curiosity, and her upstate New York studio is a ranch house with a red door on a dead-end street overlooking a hillside garden. Never pleased with her birth name, Marcia Ann, and with apologies to her mother, she has changed her name 7 times. And she says she could easily be in the witness protection program. Not incidentally, her summer camp story, Misfit Camper, is imagined from her mother's point of view. Please give a warm welcome to Mara Lefebvre.
My daughter, Marcia Ann, is a whiner and a liar. God bless her. It's another hot summer in 1960 in Central Valley in California. She is the youngest, a charming troublemaker. Her two older siblings can't compete with her creative tactics to get what she wants. What she desperately wants is to go to summer camp. Relentless and clever, she concocts childlike but persuasive reasons why she should be allowed to go, with non-stop 8-year-old chatter. Exhausted, I finally give in. As a devout Catholic, I believe the Sisters of Mercy possess a divine link to the celestial rule book. Unfortunately, the grammar school education failed so far to turn Marcia Ann from fibber to truth teller. Her little girl brain is now choked with stories of saints, martyrs, and mysteries that she embellishes with whimsical details. The all-girls camp is built around a large turquoise lake in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It is run by the local diocese. It is christened Camp Santa Teresita, after a saint who promises to rain down rose petals when performing miracles. A priest campaigned for her sainthood when he found a white rose on his desk after praying to her. Marcia Ann believes the saint is called the Little Florist and explains that the rose was left there by a talking crow or an invisible flying nun. I reluctantly register for a week and wonder if in 7 days and 6 nights, a miracle might happen to my restless child. A light sleeper, she wanders our house at night, able to see like a cat, night shine from her eyes, guiding her in the dark. She is a kid that can eat a whole cantaloupe at one sitting. A kid who hates classic children's food like milk, peanut butter, and Cheerios, but will sneak raw bacon out of the refrigerator. A kid who squirms in a dress for church and prefers to run around in hand-me-down jeans, yet seems happy to wear her plaid school uniform. She packs 4 glow-in-the-dark rosaries, a laminated holy card of St. Anthony, the patron saint of lost treasures, and her favorite fuzzy stuffed ducky for her week away. Marcia Ann is the tallest student in her 3rd grade class, thin, athletic, with long blonde hair, and the fastest runner, even faster than the boys. This height, inherited from her grandfather, makes her seem a lot more mature than she is, and results in her getting assigned to cabin 10 with the much older girls. Every minute she is at camp, I wait for the phone in the kitchen to ring. I pray. I expect a call from the young, polite, but inexperienced counselors asking why Marcia Ann won't eat her dinner of meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy, refuses to swim in the lake, get her ears wet, or stop humming during daily mass. Relieved, no one calls. When the camp bus returns from the lake back to the school parking lot, Marcia Ann is the first one off. With her dimpled smile, she runs to me, clutching a lanyard woven with the colors of the rainbow as a special gift. I hug her hard and long, but feel a change in her, a subtle shift to remember with tears just why she is my favorite child. The ride home is filled with tales of overheard whispers from her senior bunkmates that Marcia Ann struggles to make sense of, stories about how French kissing must only happen in France, and isn't a period just at the end of a sentence? Mom, what is going steady? Why shave your legs? Why stuff socks in your bra? I answer her with love and patience. Pleased we survived and learned unexpected lessons from a hot July week away at summer camp.
Kim Van Alcamata was born in Manhattan, and she spent her childhood in New Jersey before moving to Wisconsin, where she earned a doctorate in English from UW-Milwaukee. She moved to the Capital District 5 years ago after retiring from Shippensburg University of Pennsylvania, where she taught writing. She has published 3 novels, and her latest, Counting Lost Stars, launching last July with an event at Northshire Books. Recently, she gave the Greyfriar reading at Siena College. She taught an online class for the Adirondack Center for Writing and participated on a panel at the Albany Book Festival. She makes her home in Saratoga Springs with her partner, their 2 rescue dogs, and a couple of feisty backyard chickens. In Deep Water Test, the story that closes our special summer camp show, Kim relates how she found herself, quite literally, out of her depth. Please welcome Kim Van Alcamata.
The hook hovered over me like a severed hula hoop at the end of a pole. I refused to reach for it, despite my waterlogged lungs and wobbly arms. As I flailed and splashed through the green waters of Lake Beisler, the summer camp lifeguard stepped sideways along the aluminum dock, following me with the hook. He practically pleaded for me to let him haul me out of the water, but reaching for that hook was as impossible for me as passing the deep water swimming test was turning out to be. I'm not even sure why I joined the line of 8-year-old campers who wanted to prove they could swim safely past the shallow crescent near the pebbly shore. I didn't like being out of my depth. Not in school, where my behavior wasn't compliant enough to please my teachers. Not at home, where my dad's latest disappearance was explained away with lies. And definitely not here, in a cold lake where slimy weeds stroked the bottoms of my feet. But for some reason, I had lined up, nervously waiting my turn in my navy blue swimsuit with the white ruffled skirt. To pass the deep water test, a camper had to swim the length of the dock and back without stopping or grabbing hold. As soon as I let go of the ladder and launched myself into the lake, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake because the truth was, I couldn't actually swim. Oh, I'd waded into streams before and splashed around the pool at the YMCA, but no one had taught me how to put my face in the water, blow out bubbles, then turn to the side to breathe air in. Instead, I held up my head as best I could, gasping and choking while water filled my mouth. I smacked my arms haphazardly as my frantic legs churned below the opaque surface. Through tears, I kept the end of the dock in sight, ignoring the hook whenever it dipped into my blurry field of vision. That dock could not have been more than 30 feet long, but I fought for every inch of it. I reached the end, but having reached it, I had to splash myself around in a sloppy circle to return, again, to the metal ladder. The lifeguard's entreaties became more desperate as I propelled myself forward. Finally, my fist closed on the aluminum railing. My feet found purchase on the ribbed metal steps. I hauled my little body up onto the dock, knees weak and stomach sloshing. Limp with relief at still being alive, I vowed never to venture past the buoy line into deep water for the rest of that summer in the Catskills. The incredulous lifeguard congratulated me on my courage, but I hadn't spurned his hook because I was brave. I'd kept struggling blindly forward because here at camp, as at school, and at home, I had not yet learned that it's okay to reach a trusting hand for help when you find yourself in over your head.
Let's have all the writers come back up. We built Writers Read around afternoons like this one, and it is really thrilling to me to spend this curated kind of time with such a fine group of writers. And I am really proud of what a small group of committed, unpaid volunteers has accomplished and continues to build with me. Thank you again to today's sponsor, the New York State Writers Institute, and to all of you for your support of our efforts here today. There are lots of moving parts to this organization, and we need help steering it. We have a professional editorial team, and we have the bones of a great marketing committee, though it would be amazing to have someone assist with social media. The social media marketing is not my superpower at all. And we also have open seats on our finance committee. So if you are interested or you have some bandwidth, some room for some board service, you can talk to me at the reception, and we're always interested in thoughts, or email your suggestions to ed@writersread.org. Speaking of email, I know none of us want more of it. But receiving our newsletter once or twice a month will allow us to stay in touch and keep you posted about deadlines, about upcoming submissions, new podcast episodes. You can sign up at the bottom of any page on our website. Please do take your program with you. Share it with someone you think will be interested in what we do. We're so interested in featuring new voices all the time. Please do consider a charitable, tax-deductible gift to Writers Read in any amount to help us grow. We cannot do what we do without your encouragement and support, which is why this round of applause from us on the stage is for all of you. Now, please don't rush off while there is wine to drink, and there's Richard has put together some beautiful charcuterie platters that I know we're going to appear any moment. But please do stick around to meet the writers and share some conversation and wine. But first, we have one last thing to do, and we've even rehearsed it. Hold on, come on up. Step up here.